But then sometimes God blesses you with somebody who is just like an angel. You know what I mean? And I wouldn't have been as successful without her in my life, because the I had received just before starting her was just going to trip me up and have me on a whole nother page that I would just self-sabotaged on, and I didn't choose that path.
Nana is my brother's daughter who lost her life last year.
As a black therapist, right, I come into the space like, yeah, I get it, you can't quit. If there's nothing that I can say but I validate you, because I've been there and I know how it feels, and that shit sucks.
That's deep. I need that. I'm glad you held space for me to share that.
Welcome to another edition of Pain and the Purpose Podcast. Welcome to this edition of the Pain and the Purpose Podcast. I'm the host, Darrin Bedford, and today I have the lovely Tammi Edwards. I met her maybe about a year ago now. We're in the same program ran by my older brother, and she has just been an amazing soul. And my earliest recollection is the day I did my presentation, and you stood out and you encouraged me to not only do it again but to keep going. And then when I went to go do my presentation for the school for M.A.R.C. College, you came and supported me, and then we just been rocking ever since. I affectionately call her One Take Tammi. Welcome to the show. How you feeling today?
Thank you. I am doing well today. I appreciate you inviting me to be on the show today.
Nah, I appreciate you saying that you wanted to come, because I don't know what you seen, but you hit me one day and was like, I want to come now. I'm ready. So whenever somebody tell me that they're ready, let's make it happen.
For me, it was turning pain into purpose is just right where I'm at the moment. I've experienced many, many deaths in life of various family members. Starting when I was 6 years old, I lost my mother. And at 15 years old, I lost my grandmother. And at 16 years old, I lost my step-grandfather. So my whole world that I had known from birth until 16 had just shifted. Dealing with the first death of when my mother passed, I developed a sugar addiction. Didn't process my emotions, and my feelings just stuffed them. Therefore becoming overweight at a very early age. But I had the love of my grandmother, who had always been there for me. And I thought she was going to be there for me for the rest of my life. And she died of cancer when I was 15. And she didn't tell anybody. So we didn't find out that she had cancer until after her death. So fortunately, I got to go to the hospital and braid her hair a couple of days before her surgery. And so I have that memory because I didn't get to say bye. And I just remember distinctively at 3 a.m. the hospital calling and letting us know that she had passed. And then they allowed us to come and see her at that time. That was about the only death that I processed fully without any sugar. Well, let me not say that. I'm not going to say, because sugar has always been my drug of choice. It was my coping mechanism. And so I actually really processed and cried for months and months until the acceptance came into play. I really feel complete with her of processing that death. Now, my step-grandfather died a year and exactly 2 weeks after her. And so I just was thrown off. Just my whole foundation, where I was living, everything changed. Moved to the Hercules area with my maternal grandfather and his wife, who recently just passed at 92. He passed 6 years ago at 93. But I got to live the rest of my life with them. But it shook me to the core, losing my grandparents at 15 and 16. And so therefore, I didn't know how to quite deal with that. And I got into escapism. Luckily, the upbringing that I had always been faced with family members having substance abuse challenges. So I had promised my grandparents that that wouldn't be me. But it did become me. But because I had that balance, I didn't stay there. I didn't live in that space. I was able to finish high school on time, even though I missed a whole half a semester of the 11th grade. I ended up moving to Texas and finishing high school on time and having to do a whole bunch of stuff just to be able to be complete in that area. And then I moved back to California, of course. It was a little challenging because my foundation is gone. I have my grandparents, but my foundation's gone. And so moving back home was quite challenging. I think I had outgrown being in California, but also not wanting to stay in Texas as well either. But I needed a little bit more support in the area of dealing with the deaths that had occurred in my life.
So, what do so you said that you was able to fully complete the process with your grandmother, but you didn't say you was able to fully complete the process with your grandfather.
I couldn't. It was too overwhelming. Those were the two. They were very significant in my life, and I think with him passing, there was just a completion there. We had to move from our home that I had grew up in from the time I was born, in and out. With my mother, I lived with my mom, but then after my mom passed, I was there with them all the time. Yeah. And so I had to move to a whole new area. I had to do things differently. I just didn't know how to process it. To be honest, I just walked out of the house, somebody's house one day, and I just didn't come back for hours.
So that story has so many different levels to it because you touched on so many different aspects of the journey in a way of so a few deaths or one death you was able to completely process through, and then the rest of them you just let compound on top of each other. So what do you do today to process your grief?
So many deaths have happened as of that. After that, I would stay busy during the funeral services. I would be the one organizing, doing the obituary, getting family members together. I learned to just take myself out of the pain. And so what happened, if you do that for so many years, when one significant death happens to you, everybody death comes back on you. So you're not just crying for that one person that has just died. You're crying for everybody that you never fully processed.
And I would encourage you to go back and begin the process. Try writing a letter. Try writing each person an individual letter. Right? And I've learned on this journey that all deaths probably don't need to be processed. Just the significant ones, right? Because I just recently lost a sister, right? And although I'm processing that pain, it's nowhere near as traumatic to me as losing my daughter. And then I lost my mother. So I love my sister and I miss my sister dearly, but the pain don't compare. So maybe go back and first decide which deaths you do need to process. And just because a person passes away, it don't necessarily mean that it's going to be an extensive grief process behind it. And that's okay. So we get tied up sometimes thinking that we have to have this extensive grief process because they passed away. And that's not necessarily the case in most cases. And it also depends on how they passed away. So like my sister, she passed away in her sleep. There's nobody to be mad at. You know what I'm saying? You can't get mad at natural causes. You know what I'm saying? So versus someone actually physically taking my child away from me. And then my mom was elderly and she had been sick for some time. So that makes it easier to process. So all three of those deaths, although they impact me, the process is different, if that makes sense. And so I probably will start with the grandfather who shook your world up because that seems to have the most significant impact on you. And it, when you talk about it, it looked like it still is affecting you today.
I think it affects me today only because I can pinpoint that's the start of when I started to cover the feelings, when I started to bury my emotions and my feelings. Remember at 6, my mother passed. I buried all those feelings. I remember being at the casket. I remember prior to that, I remember my grandmother telling me my mother died. I just remember saying, something's wrong with you. And I said, your cheeks are red. She had been crying. And she said, your mother has passed away. And I cried at that moment because she was crying. Because prior to that, I had been living with them I think towards almost a month or so. I know, I
Yeah.
remember them coming to get me. And I don't know if I just felt numb in that moment or what it was, but I just remember being a 6-year-old kid not having really any emotions about her passing away. She had already been just there, but not there.
Distant.
Yes, we had a strained relationship. She's 26 at that 20 no it's 26 23 at that time. I'm 6, and so she's a young mother. My mother died when she was 24.
Yeah, and the fact that you were 6 plays a big part in it. We're not that emotionally tied to a bunch of stuff at that age.
But that is
But
my mother.
so it's your mother, and so that's what I was just saying. So we make ourselves feel like we supposed to feel something because of the relationship tied to us. But at 6, you don't have those emotions yet in you. You have the memory, but you don't have no emotion to tie to that.
I could see that, but I felt something, and I don't know what it was because I tried to stuff it.
Because you were 6.
That's true. I get it.
But at 16, when you lost your grandfather, you're a little older now. You're a little bit more mature. You're a little bit more in touch with life at that point. And he may have been your superhero too.
It always been there.
So it's a deeper connection there. And that's why today it still hits you in your chest when you talk about it. Because when you were talking about it, I seen it in your face. And so I think that might be the first one that you write a letter to. And forgiving, right? Because if it was up to him, he probably wouldn't have left you under those conditions. But at 16, we just angry because we were left.
Well, I think my issues are just stem from abandonment, period. So any being my mother leaving at 6, then my grandmother at 15, and you have 16. I've been dealing with abandonment for a while. The grace I had when my mother died, my grandmother was very much smart enough to put me in therapy. So I remember them giving me an exercise, as you say, about at being 6, of where I could go and visit her. They were like, I would meditate and I would go and cross a bridge and she would be on the other side and I would just talk to her in spirit. And then I would cross back over and then I would go to sleep. And I've never forgotten that exercise. I've never forgotten just being able to. You don't know what you're doing with a therapist at 6. They're basically you just playing games. They're just trying to see how you're doing emotionally. You know what I mean? So been in therapy a very long time, very long time, which is a lot of my saving grace. But it wasn't able to save me when that last death, which was that last death in my teenage years, which was my step grandfather who passed away, and I just couldn't take it. I just fell apart and didn't even know that, though. Didn't even know I was falling apart.
But how could you? How could you? Just think about the time period. We just started talking about therapy as a tangible way to process these emotions. We just started talking about mental health and having these kind of conversations. So at 16, back then, I'm thankful that at least somebody had you in therapy at 6 when it wasn't popular. You know what I'm saying? So that could be your saving. That definitely is your saving grace. And so to fast forward a little bit, you took all that pain and created a nonprofit.
Yes, I turned my pain into purpose by giving back in an area which I fully knew, which was I had to be, at some point, I gained support from other people. I'm back in therapy, serious therapy at 22 years old. I'm in a full-fledged CBT program, cognitive behavior program, getting my life together. And so I learned about support in that particular environment because I wouldn't have been able to survive if I didn't have the support of other people. So fast forward, it's more than 25 years because it's called Project M.A.R.C, Making a Real Commitment 25. I created it in 2016. So we're coming up on our 10 years next year. And it's a program helping girls and women to move from dependency to self-sufficiency through life skills, mentoring, and support, which is my passion.
And I would argue that passion was developed because at 16, that's exactly what you had to do. So you're talking about it from a standpoint of lived experience. So
Say I'm a credible messenger. Very credible in it.
So it is only right that you help other 16-year-olds. Or I think maybe as young as 13 may need those type of services.
We start at 8. We have programs that start at 8.
Because the maturity level in today's society is way younger. So
Very much so. And we also support women too, because that's the other aspect. As a young woman, being 21, 22, I had support of other women at that time, even before I started the cognitive behavior therapy, the intensive therapy. I had support of other women who were coming up and going to school, going to work, having childcare issues. I had that support. That's where Project M.A.R.C was created. There was the original program was called Project M.A.R.C. I just tacked on the 25 because I created it 25 years later. Yeah. But I knew how significant that process was for me, even before I got into severe therapy, that I had that type of support, which when I finished my therapy program and got back into society or whatever, I was able to move with ease, saying I had a point of reference. The other thing for me is my grandmother was very adept. I had mentors at between the ages of 10 and probably 13. And I had 2 significant ones. One that I'm still in contact with as of today. She's went on to mentor many other young women. But to be able to come back and tell her how significant she was in my life was just, it was touching for her, but touching for me as well, because she was really instrumental. She took me to her job when I was younger and showed me how to balance a checkbook. That's no longer valid, y'all, but we used to have the balanced checkbooks and look at our money. Now you just get a report. And so those were things that were very significant to me. It showed me work ethics. I just never wanted to sit around and not do anything. Like, as you say, I'm one take Tammy, but I'm also always studying and in some program, always bettering myself. The work on yourself never stops. It never stops. I am now 54, even though I don't look it. It never stops. It just gets easier and better. And as we were talking, as of now, the things that I do to deal with my trauma today is I take time for me. I take time and sit with me. I take time, as you say, I spend time in my ancestral room and sit with the pictures of my ancestors and just commune with them in spirit. What am I supposed to be doing? What am I here for? Yes, this is painful, but I actually look at them. I don't just have the pictures in a photo album where I only look at them once a year. This is a daily practice that I'm developing for myself so that they're always with me, which makes the pain a little bit more easier to deal with.
it makes it easier to deal with from the aspect of they may not be here physically, but you still connected emotionally and spiritually. So I'll be riding or I'll be talking to my baby, he's sitting right next to me. And if you quiet enough, you'll hear their voice talk back. So before I would have thought that that was wild to say, but then you experience it and you like maybe it's not so wild.
I usually get those experiences when someone immediately passes away and I tune into their frequency. They tell me that they're okay. So I think it's just an appeasement of the mind. It kind of just says, hey.
I don't know if it's an appeasement of the mind because this is something that I never really talk about, and I probably never said this on a podcast before, but day 2 after my daughter was taken from me, I have a light in my bathroom. It can change from yellow to blue or white. It was off and it came on and it turned yellow to blue and I was up crying and then I could see my baby and she was just leaning against the wall and she was like, "Pops, I'm good." So I don't think that it's, whereas before I would have totally disregarded that, but then to experience it and it's these little brown birds that's always at the cemetery when I do decide to go. I only been to the cemetery maybe 4 times in 2.5 years. But I was in the middle of the ocean with my brother. We on a cruise and these 2 little brown birds came and they just landed on the coffee table. They hung around for about 10 minutes and they were gone. But it was an anniversary of the day that she was taken away, because I took a trip that day because I didn't want to be out here. So it'd be things like that that happen that you like, okay, they're good. You know what I'm saying? So to have a room dedicated to your ancestors, I would go sit in there and write letter.
I think that's a really good idea to say, just to release them. Like I said, the one thing we have to do is figure out what our patterns are. So my patterns for death is to isolate. It's like after I do all the funeral stuff and I'm up and I'm busy, then I'm gone. So this last time, because I'm very much self-aware, I told all my closest friends, hey, if you don't hear from me and I say I'm okay and I'm fine, I'm not. I'm saying that because I've taken on this role of being this strong person. And I'm really not that strong when it comes to death. This is the one area is going to cause me some issues or some problems. And everybody is going to pass away. It's the power of perspective, right? See this, oh, they're going on to glory, or they're for me. You know what I mean? They're no longer here, right? But the acceptance piece comes when you're settled in your mind. And like we talk about that little small voice sometimes we hear when people immediately pass on is, I'm okay. You can release your tears, you can cry, but you can't get stuck here in the grief. I 10 pounds just recently stuck because my grandmother had just passed. Now I went and took care of her. I was there with the family. I did all these things thinking that was going to make it a little bit more easier to deal with. I stayed in the house a month.
And I would say that's okay, right? Because you're aware, right? But to not process it that way, what's the alternative?
Just run and be busy and
And,
not deal with it at all.
and so I prefer you to deal with it in that aspect than not deal with it, because we both understand that just because you try to bury the feelings within you, they still show up. So I developed a laugh without feeling guilty and a cry without feeling weak, because I'm going to laugh some days and I'm going to cry some days, and both days are okay, right? But acknowledging, like that, acknowledging your patterns, right? And you know that you're going to isolate, give yourself a timeline to isolate, because that's part of your process. So it's not bad. So it only become a bad thing if you abuse it. So if that's part of your process, accept it as part of your process and be like, okay, so isolate myself for 30 days. I might gain some weight. It's cool. But then I'm going to come out and I'm going to be able to move forward with life. This grief journey is so personal and it's so heavy, and there is no right or wrong way to do it. So somebody to say there's no right or wrong way to do it and then try to condemn you for isolating is like an oxymoron. But that's what people do all the time. If isolation is part of your process, we're going to put a limit on it so it's going to become detrimental. But we're going to just allow that to be part of the process. And we're going to say that it's okay. And we're not going to beat ourselves up for that being part of the process.
Yeah, I got recently that's to be in that zone. Yeah. It's just dangerous when you stay in that zone. But also you do want people to be aware of what's going on with you.
But you did that. You told people. Mm-hmm. So you told people.
But that's a first in a very long time. Saying I'm learning what my patterns are so I am able to speak to it so people know. Because people just go on, a strong one. She don't need no help. She don't ever say nothing. She just, she up for everybody. She do for everybody. Need no help. Oh, she all right.
I blame us because that's how we present ourselves.
Exactly. And I'm that's who I want to be, because that's not who I am for other people. Like, I'm people. Yeah. So if my friends come and stand in front of me, I'm like, what's going on with you? And they may say, oh, I'm nothing. I'm like, no, there's something going on. And so I'm very much emotionally aware of what other people are going through. I don't know how to read me, because my emotions, I wear my emotions on my forehead or even in my chest. It's just like I have this same nice little smile, and like, I don't want to burden anyone with it or anything, because I've always had mechanisms to talk to people with. I have a therapist for 30 years,
We look at life as a pie. Therapy is only one section of it, because a therapist is your only non-reciprocal relationship. Take everything to the therapist. They don't never give you nothing personal from them. They give you strategies and tips through textbook, right? Some therapists may share a little bit of their personal story, but most therapists won't share their story. So it's like a one-way street.
In most cases, I was blessed to ask for an African American therapist when I was like just years old. I was blessed with a woman who was at that time probably in her 60s because she's 90 now. Um, and the I gained from her, and it almost makes me want to cry because it was almost like she was heaven sent. Yeah. That I could have got caught up in and based on programming and doing things a particular way. I gained freedom with this therapist. And at times she shared her life with me. She's also a giver. She worked with women in the community too. You know what I mean? And just always gave me accolades for being self-aware because like you said, it is one-way reciprocal, right? It is for the most part. But then sometimes God blesses you with somebody who is just like an angel. You know what I mean? And I wouldn't have been as successful without her in my life because the I had received just before starting her was just going to trip me up and have me on a whole nother page that I would just self-sabotaged on, and I didn't choose that path. So yeah, in cases, they're just not great therapists. There are some that are really great. You have to, what healing mechanism you choose to engage in, you have to just keep going until you find the one that works for you. In my case, that's what worked. That may not work for everybody else, though. Remember, I've been doing this since I was 6. You know what I mean? So I've been doing talk therapy forever, and then I did some other type of therapy where I was in there for like 14 straight, like therapy. I just meet this wonderful woman who just helped to steer me in I'm going to say the second quarter of my life. Yeah. So now I'm into the third quarter, so.
Yeah, after it's third quarter, you're in the third quarter. So it sounds like you already had the tools to process what you need to. I think sometimes we forget some of the tools that we already possess, and we go looking for more, like it's out there better. But here and it stick to the basics. The basics is still work. The basics is still beautiful, and it the ones that get you through some tough days.
Yeah, I like that. Like first sat down and we were talking about just writing a letter. Yeah. That to be. I wrote my mother many letters. Like I had to do some deep with her. My grandmother, like I said, I don't. When I think of her, I don't cry. When I go to the gravesite, I don't cry. I don't. There's like completion there. Yeah. Like I recognize she was the angel at that time. She loved on me. She gave me what she can. I do. I miss her. Yes, I wish she was still here, right? But because I didn't fully understand or know how to process my mother's death, that death kept compounded. Those two deaths compounded onto my step grandfather passing away. Like you say, those are you can see the emotion or you can feel the emotion in me is because that's where my life shifted the most. And that's where I started going through my trials and tribulations and had to persevere to get out, to what they had given me, my foundation, what they had given me. Yeah. I'm here. I'm a 54-year-old woman navigating life, just trying to be the best woman that I can be and give back. But what I had to realize about giving back is I first got to take care of me and go for the answers inside of me first.
True that. And this is something that I struggle with for like the year. So I'm going to ask you, have you forgiven yourself?
For not accepting their death or forgiving myself for
what? So when it comes to your grandfather, what is it that you feel that you probably didn't do that you could have done differently? So like for me, losing a child as a father, I felt like a failure for a long time and carried that anger. Like what I have done differently to preserve my child's life. And it took me, and even though I know I couldn't have done nothing and I've come to terms with it, it still comes up every now and again, even today. And I think that's just a natural part of the grief process. So what I've learned on this journey is the hard deaths that we have a problem with processing. Somewhere is something that we feel like we could have done differently. And so we fully forgiven ourselves for whatever that thing is. And until we come to terms with we couldn't have done whatever we think we could have done, it helps it process it a little bit easier.
Myself, I've done a lot of work in terms of death, my guilt, my shame. I'm constantly reviewing those tapes to answer your question about forgiveness, it's how I handled it. Like I don't even know where I got the idea to escape it. Like I don't even know where that even came from. I really believe it was just something that meant to happen for me in my life. Because the way I walked out of that house that day as if I knew what I was going to do and I knew I was going to numb the pain at 16, I don't even recall where did that come from. That was just part of my path. So I think I need to forgive myself for that, for not having or not utilizing the skills that I had gained from therapy coming up from 6 all the way probably up until 12, I think. And I chose to escape it. I didn't want to process it. It was just compound hurt and pain.
Compound hurt, trauma, and the things that you knew you were going to have to go through because you him. So I would encourage you to forgive yourself for that because you didn't know. And so I have this other saying that hindsight was never meant to be foresight, just because we gained some insight. So because we gained some new insight, we beat ourselves up for the things that we didn't know back then. Hindsight was never meant to be foresight. You know what I'm saying? So forgive yourself for that. And it's not an easy task, but I believe that once you're able to forgive yourself for that, you'll be able to process that a little bit more and it won't weigh so heavy on you. You know what I'm saying? So those are two things I got for you today. Forgiving and writing a letter. You know what I mean? And maybe writing a letter can be part of you forgiving yourself. Because in that letter, you can go over everything that because the remembers the score, right? But the mind remember the plays that actually happened and the plays that it wished would happen. You know what I'm saying? So in this letter, combine all that together and help yourself process through that one. Because you and yourself credit because you've been you've been doing an amazing job. So give yourself credit because okay, your story and whatever happened. But the woman that's sitting in front of me today, the woman I met almost 2 years ago, didn't have no traces of whatever your life experience was. So with that being said, like we could give ourselves grace. Like this journey with grief is difficult. It's tough. And we're doing it with limited information. And just having these type of conversations, we gaining more insight, more clarity. And two, back then at 16, you was confused as hell.
And the one thing is, if you don't deal with something, and as you know, we both are reading this book, Feelings Buried Alive, they buried and they get stored in other parts of your body, right? Yeah. And so, as you said, the body keeps the score. Well, trauma begins to develop as a result of you not processing your emotions and your feelings, right? Because then you go like into escapism, or you go overindulgence in food, or alcohol, or drugs, whatever the case may be. It's going to be some effect. You got a cause and you're going to have an effect. So the thing that I've learned over many years of doing work on myself is facing the trauma. And also, like you said, I've many letters to myself about releasing shame and guilt. You know, I didn't know back then. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? But as a 54-year-old woman today, I know a lot. You know, also give a lot. You know, I have my nonprofit, but I also give a lot to people who are in my life in terms of you can look at my life and see that you can make it. You know, start to be told so other people can get some
most
experience,
definitely.
Strength, and hope through you, right?
Most definitely.
You know, just for a whole nother episode about the trauma I experienced and that came out of as a result of not dealing with that death at 16. It just compounded. I just had the perseverance to push through. But then in doing the work, just kind of just like, okay, this is still here. This trauma is still there. You to leave out of relationships. It causes you to leave relationship with yourself at times. You know what I mean? Yeah. And start people pleasing and self-sacrificing and doing all these things that are not healthy for you at all. Dealing with grief and trauma, the process of not losing yourself while you're processing it is very key and important. And that's one of the messages, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to come on today, is because I recognized another pattern. It's like a little bit of me each time somebody dies. Isolation time, I'm still losing a little piece of me. Till like this last death of my grandmother, I just was like, this is not how, something clicked for me. And it could have been in talking to DB, it could have been in talking to you, something clicked like, people are going to die. I don't have to die with them each time they die.
No.
I can choose to celebrate their life, honor their life, but also live my life. Like you say, laugh sometimes and sometimes cry. Somewhere along the line, I stopped processing my emotions and allowing myself to cry and to feel. Get back to that. You can't bury the feelings. They will get stuck in your hip. They will get stuck in your leg, get stuck in your knee, get stuck in your wrist. You have to process those emotions.
Most definitely.
And so in me saying, oh, I need to talk about this, it's because I need to talk to myself about it while I'm telling somebody else. Still heal while you wounded, right? We have this thing called the healer. It's the person who has been through so much, but also she still may be a little wounded, or he or she may be still wounded, but they have a word for you. They have something for you to help. They may have something or show you a way that you can get to the other side.
And they got a word for you because they have been through it. So Kirk say, we have to win wounded. You know what I mean? And so with that being said, I think this was a lovely episode of the Pain and the Purpose podcast with my lovely host, Tammi Queen Edwards. And as she just said, she will be back to talk about her trauma that she had to endure based on her losing so many people at such a young age. You have any closing words?
I just would like to tell everybody, do not bury your feelings alive. Deal with what is coming up for you in the moment. That is the most important, and it's very key to things that you inevitably don't have a choice to overcome. Death is something that we all are going to have to deal with eventually. And I find that, when I were younger, I know life. I'm 54. Life goes on. I've had a great life. And I can understand that the pain of somebody losing someone at 54 versus 6 is way different. You have way more time with those individuals. So the pain is going to be different, right? So my takeaway from this interview is deal with your feelings and your emotions in the moment and be present for yourself.
We love you. Peace.
Peace.